Was weather engineering used in the Texas storm and flood of July 4th, 2025? Let's look at satellite images and examine the facts and science of weather engineering and let you decide for yourself. Was this Texas storm natural or was it engineered? Many people think it was cloud seeding because there was cloud seeding companies that were operating in the area of central Texas during that time period. However, cloud seeding is old school technology of spraying something into existing clouds and causing it to nucleate the moisture and make that moisture drop to the ground. It's 100-year-old technology. We've come a long ways since then. And what I see is cloud generation, not just cloud seeding. So let's look at the satellite images for that time period. Now this is universal time up here, so it starts at midnight of July 4th in the morning. This is actually 6 hours earlier because that's what Texas is, so it's actually 6 p.m. on the 3rd. Basically in the nighttime, you can see normal clouds, and it's colorized, so the darker the cloud cover, the denser it is. So let's take a look at this, watching the time as it goes. And you see right around Kerrville this massive, explosion of clouds created from a point source, actually blowing against the wind pattern. The wind's going to the south, and you see this is blowing to the north against the wind, suddenly generating a massive cloud from a point source. And you see it radiating in all directions like a big circle. Another one up around Junction now, which is actually upstream from the river that flooded. And then as you go later in the night, a massive one north of that, even bigger upstream, super black and dense, generates out of nowhere suddenly a huge cloud and then dissipates and blows off in the wind pattern going to the south. Then it disappears kind of as fast as it was formed. Interesting. Let's look at that from other points of view. Here's a black and white satellite image of the same area where you suddenly see out of nowhere this big cloud suddenly forming and then passing to the south and going off in the winds. Let's look at it in a colorized version. So again, all of a sudden, really dark, dense cloud from one point source blowing against the wind. And this is speeded up. It's a big, long time period. But you'll see the same thing. Let's look at it close up and really see what we're talking about with this sudden generation of a cloud out of nothing from one point source and then suddenly being caught by the wind and going to the south. So what could possibly be doing that? A point source generation of cloud. This woman came up with some very interesting observation. Let's see what she noticed.
The storm didn't move. It stayed parked over the same area for nearly 22 hours. Any storm parked in a single area for that long would cause significant damage like this. Check this out. I run a radar show on my website, arianamasters.com, where I review tower and trail activity every single day. And look at what I found from my July 3rd show. Radar from July 3rd shows a circular storm cell spinning in place from 8 p.m. Central to almost 8 p.m. yesterday evening on the 4th, with continual rain persisting in the aftermath. At the same time, wind data shows something striking: a total dead zone over central Texas, while normal air currents flowed freely around it. So the question is, what kept the storm from moving?
Very good question. Let's see if we can answer that question. We're going to look again at the satellite, same satellite image, but now we're going to look at it. Why would the clouds not move? If you're generating clouds from a point source, blow out in all directions against it, it would appear that the clouds aren't moving, because if you're generating the clouds in that particular zone, and you have an aerosol generator capable of creating a cloud, blowing out in all directions from the point source, then it would appear from someone looking at the satellite images that it's not moving. And you can kind of see a big circle there going against the wind, then eventually rising up, being caught by the wind and moving to the south. But its initial blast goes out in all directions against the wind and would appear to be staying in the same place throughout the day. And then a big blast at the end coming down from the north, the upwaters of the river. So do are we capable of creating clouds? Well, this is an old school caught by a BBC station reporting on cloud generation machine. Again, this is old school, back from the 80s. This video has been around a long time, but it shows the point source generation of a massive cloud forming in one spot, rising up, and then being caught by the wind and carrying on its way, creating rain from this cloud. Now, this is old school technology that was really huge. We've come a long ways since then to make them small. Here's one in the back of a pickup truck, basically, creating a cloud from a point source. And here they are mounted on little tanks out there in the battlefield. The Taurus molecular cloud, creating a cloud out of nothingness, nucleating the moisture which is already present in the air. If you have to spray something, then it nucleates it, so the moisture condenses on nanoparticles in this whole toxic soup. Here's that same one from the back of a pickup truck, and watch how quickly it makes a cloud out of nothing, apparently nothing, from a point source generation from the back of a truck. Now imagine a large scale that up to a larger one that's capable of generating a cloud very quickly. We have the technology to do this. This technology you can buy from military contractors, they mount onto boats. And they've also been seen from coal fire plants, coal plants suddenly creating a cloud, massive cloud. Now, coal, we are able to clean it with the scrubbers and pull out the coal fly ash, the most toxic component of the coal, and clean it. But here's suddenly this big cloud forming from point source at a coal fire plant. People are seeing this, all over the country in different places. On the left, that's how it looks when you see it from a weather satellite. And let's look at that more closely. From a weather satellite, that's that same coal plant suddenly creating a massive barrage of weather. Now, coal fly ash is a toxic element. It's a waste product. And this researcher, J. Marvin Herndon, got published in a peer-reviewed journal, which was later redacted under pressure. But he still got published, and it's still there. And he looked at evidence of coal fly ash in the geoengineering and the consequences that could have for public health. And he took, on a spray day, he gathered material from a HEPA filter on an air filter and compared that to coal fly ash and found it's got the same fingerprint as coal fly ash. Primary element is aluminum, but also barium, strontium, nickel, cadmium, and zinc, and a host of other particles in nano form, because when you burn coal at extremely high temperature, it makes those minerals nano and ionic. That's why we can reduce them with scrubbers, because they're ionic particles, and it removes the particles and becomes a waste product from the coal industry. He also took the rainwater from a spraying day and compared it to the leachate of coal fly ash, when you put coal fly ash in water and see what leaches out of it, and basically found the same fingerprint of the leachate of coal fly ash and the rainwater on a spray day. Interesting. And of course, we have these boats plying around the ocean, waters of the ocean. They call them power ships, like power stations, but they have all the technology you would need to also be an aerosol generator from a boat. We're seeing massive aerosol releases from point source out in the ocean from ships. These are made by a company in Turkey, but several different, China and Russia and everybody else has these similar power boats supply across the waters of the ocean. So could this be the source of the ocean-based aerosol generation? And of course, in order to do that, if you can let's look at weather engineering. Let's look at solar radiation management, they call it. This is trying to reflect heat away from the planet as a chemotherapy for our alleged global warming. And you spray this stuff in the stratosphere, it's supposed to reflect heat away, these little ionic nanoparticles of aluminum. They say sulfur, but sulfur is not reflected enough. Aluminum is highly effective for that task. And just like a volcanic eruption puts stuff in the stratosphere, they're talking about putting stuff in the stratosphere. And volcanic eruption sequesters the moisture around the particles of the volcano coming out and sequesters the moisture, and then it rises up into the stratosphere where it shears off in the high-speed stratospheric winds and travels around the planet. They're talking about mimicking that as geoengineering. And the stratospheric aerosols have been slowly increasing every year for the last 35 years since we've been seeing these stratospheric aerosol programs happening. And it's increasing, not something they're planning to do, but something that is happening now. So that is, climate intervention methods that they're proposing to do using sulfur. However, we know they're actually doing it using things other than sulfur. So then you want to be able to take these ionic particles, you want to suddenly make the cloud release its energy. Well, when there's ions from the release, that's part of the cold fly ash, if indeed that's what they're using, and it makes sense, then these ionospheric heaters of the HAARP antennas in Alaska can actually affect them. Now, these ionospheric heaters react in the stratosphere and the ionosphere where the ions, the ozone layer is, but it can interact, within the atmosphere if there's ionic particles, because they're ionospheric heaters, ions to interact with. Now, this is the big one in Alaska. Again, this is old school technology. They now have mini ionospheric heaters, mounted on ships and boats and, tanks. And this big one right here, they call it the HAARP dome, that comes in Honolulu Harbor, that flies around the oceans of the Pacific, allegedly involved in weather engineering projects there. So was this used in order to suddenly wreak an electrical change in those clouds and make them suddenly release their moisture as quickly as they were generated? We have the technology. Did we use it? Was the Texas storm and flood of July 4th, 2025 natural or engineered? I'll let you decide.